Returning the jar to Egypt wasn't going to be easy, but Grandad had asked me to, so I'd do it. First, though, I had to get it back from Tulip. It was too late and too far to go to Highgate today. It would be tomorrow, after school, if Tulip didn't turn up at St Kilda's. I wasn't expecting her to somehow. Then there was Professor Hanawati's letter to Grandad, which might tell me something about the Egyptian hotel. And, I thought with a shudder, the curse. How strange that only days ago I'd mentioned dying wishes, and now we were one man dead, another dangerously ill, and what mattered most was a jar being returned to its rightful place. On the long walk home, I caught myself remembering something from a couple of years ago. Dad had taken us to a funeral, a big one, a procession, he called it. Mum had brushed off her best coats. As it was a Thursday, I was allowed to skip school to attend. Crowds were expected all along the route from Victoria Station to Westminster Abbey, where the coffin would be buried like at King's. Not that we knew who the dead person was, but that, said Dad, was exactly the point. The unknown warrior was what they called him. Dad explained how in the battlefields of France they'd dug up 4 unmarked bodies and chosen one at random. That body could have been a private, a lieutenant, a captain, anyone. He represented all the men of all ranks and all ages who died in the war. Put it like that, it sounded grand and honourable. Yet all week in the playground I was still at my local junior school back then. We'd been gossiping about what would be inside the coffin. Neddy reckoned it was full of jumbled up body parts because that was all they could find. Somebody else, Bobby I think, said it was actually a dead dog, but Rita Farley, one of the older girls, says she knew for a fact the coffin would be open, so we'd get to see for ourselves. I was horrified and fascinated by this idea. Mum had invited Grandad to come with us to the funeral. The plan was to meet him outside Woolworths. From there, we'd catch the bus to Green Park, then walk to Constitution Hill, which was one of those wide city roads where the procession was due to pass. On the morning itself, we waited 10, maybe 20 minutes for Grandad to arrive. Me done up in my best frock, with a stupid bow in my hair, fidgeting with excitement. Mum kept glancing at Dad, who was starting to get annoyed. When our bus pulled up, there was still no sign of Grandad. Dad said he wasn't waiting any longer, which meant we weren't either. Boarding the bus, I was very close to tears. I didn't understand why a funeral for someone we didn't know was more important than waiting for someone we did. Even when the funeral was over and I'd seen the black shiny horses pulling the gun carriage and the coffin draped with the Union flag, which wasn't open at all, I still felt disappointed. All we saw of the unknown soldier was a dented tin helmet, and even that wasn't his, so Dad said. Afterwards, Grandad didn't apologise or explain why he'd not come along that day. In fact, it was never mentioned again. Thinking of it now, the whole process, the dead bodies, the long journey from France, the public funeral, reminded me of a bizarre situation I was in. Maybe back then it had reminded Grandad too of what he and the Professor had taken. In the end, the unknown soldier was laid to rest in his home country, but the jar was still thousands of miles from Egypt, actually in Highgate to be precise, at the house of someone I'd only just met.